for Mr. Sergio Ankimbutu to reflect on the new sector of petroleum mining, should I say, in the Suriname sector. So these countries, Guyana and Suriname, represent a major discovery of oil wealth in the region. With this comes a list of project planning, and I know this specifically because I was helping to arrange finance consultancy to support project development for ports and mud plants and pipelines and storage tanks. And in my field, I also work in the area of oil and gas commodity trading. So with the major find of petroleum comes the need for proper planning, risk identification, risk mitigation, and climate risk factoring. Okay, so I would like for Mr. Sergio to talk about his experience being the former Minister of Mining for Suriname on what are his understanding in being involved in the birth of this industry in Suriname with regards to these items I just identified, and how does this relate to the need to advocate for, let's say, Washington D.C. Policy support in terms of resources to help manage and mitigate and hedge some of these risks that comes along with the sector development. So I would like to turn the platform over to Mr. Ankimbutu. You may speak for approximately, let's say, 10 to 12 minutes.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure honor to participate on this panel to contribute from our perspective the development of the oil and gas sector. Let me start with a general overview of Suriname. Suriname has a long history in mining. We know that Alcoa, Suralco, a subsidiary of Alcoa, have been mining bauxite in Suriname over the past 100 years. And then in the recent year, we have operation of IAMGOLD and Newmont mining gold. And for oil and gas, we have a history with our Staatsolie company for the last 35, 40 years. What is new nowadays is the offshore oil and gas development that's taking place right now. The Suriname has a history of mining. To summarize this, or to zoom in on the part of oil and gas, the recent development. I have to say that there's a lot going on, and with the experience we have built up in the decades, the last 4 decades, we as country are getting ready to move on. But I have to admit there's a lot that's lacking in the sense of legislation, and we talk broadly about legislation, the law, tax legislation, we talk about environmental, we're talking about local content, and those different aspects are now the topics of the daily discussion, in the country right now. For us as a country, it's a new development in the area of offshore. Having company in Suriname with the discoveries we have of Apache at Total, we see that there's a lot of opportunities for the local content. But also, as you mentioned, there was a lot also challenges ahead that we have to face and make sure that we as country not only can get the benefit out of the upcoming defense business, but also make sure that we do it in a proper way, that after these gas and oil and gas wells are depleted, that we make sure that we have our environment intact, and we have also make sure that the country has the benefit out of it. The most recent discussion and active discussion is how Suriname gonna get the maximum benefit in the sense of social economic development out of the activities that will come along with the exploitation of those oil wells the coming decades. Of course, in that sense, we also look into alternative. We know the discussion nowadays about renewable energy. Right at this moment when Guyana and Suriname has those major discovery, how you're going to make sure that at the time you are able to exploit those oil and gas, that we are able to also be part of the world, what's going on in the world, and looking also the alternative of solar energy, wind energy, and hydro dam. And I know the last one has some challenges in Suriname has already owned a hydro dam in the 60s, and this recently has been transferred to the Suriname government since the exit of Suralco. The second thought to set up a second hydro dam has been a discussion for the last 10-20 years in this country because of the challenges we have, the let me see, that's a huge challenge in the sense of environment impact, financially also, but the discussion is still ongoing, because we must be aware that to develop your country, you need to have a long-term planning for availability of energy. Let me say, not too expensive and affordable energy for the local business, but also for the country, for the people. In our perspective, I've got the honor to be a minister shortly for 1 year, since at the end of the period of the previous government. We have done some initiatives, and the focus mainly was more on the strengthening of institute, because that's the problem. As a country, part of the Caribbean, we're facing the same challenges. In my opinion, we have to do more to work together, collaboration. And secondly, we have to invest more in our own people, strengthening capacity, having strong institute in place to make sure that there is enough control mechanism, make sure that the companies that are coming in comply with all the standard rules and regulation, and make sure that we do business as we should. What we see that in Suriname, we're lacking a lot of qualified people to be able to make sure that what we agree with those multinational, that we able to control and manage and see that they are really compliant. And of course, on the other hand, there are company that register and they try to keep and stay in line. But it's also important for us as country to be able to control and make sure that the information we are getting from this company that is right and that we report accordingly. So these are the challenges we are facing, and as I mentioned, now the discussion is about the local content initiative. We see what's happening in Guyana. Guyana just introduced the local content policy. Suriname also we start together with the private sector to come up with a local content policy. We have some small let me see, portion and the different contracts, the contract of Renewable, the contract of Renewable. There's some paragraph mentioned in the middle agreement for the local content. We have some in the contract of the Stars Holding Company with those international oil company IOC. We have some part of the local content, but a general umbrella of the local content policy that's lacking. And I think that's one important thing to be looking that we have to look after and make sure that the country will get more out of the activities, the upcoming activities within the oil and gas industry. That will require leadership, that will require clear vision, that will require policy to make sure that we have the people spread out the income. And at the end of the day, the country should benefit out of all this upcoming event. One critical thing also to mention to close with my first contribution is the human capital investment in education, leveling up our people. You know, Trinidad has an experience in the oil and gas for decades. Other countries in the region. How can we combine those technologies, those knowledge we have to make sure that we meet the standard, because that's what always happening. The company come with such high standard and requirement, and with the country that's in new them, we then have the really to pick their own partner. What we used to when we work with, and that's is leaving the country behind and developing their own human capacity. So that's one focus point for us as country, and of course the government Suriname as the role to facilitate all this and make sure to be the right catalyst and make sure that everything happens accordingly. I want to stop there for now, and I'm open for any question and additional information to have on this one. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That was an excellent overview of the challenges confronting Suriname to build out the so-called new fossil fuel industry. I would like to say that the world is still hungry for fossil fuel. All the airlines still use fossil fuel. A lot of shipping still use fossil fuel. So we still have a long way to go with fossil fuel. But at the same time, the build out of these fossil fuel industry in this new age demands more constraint on how we manage and control risk, and how we adopt best management practices and best examples in the region of where there has been a successful demonstration of business and maintenance and risk mitigation, etc., etc. Now, I would like to now maybe take the discussion overseas, across the Atlantic to West Coast Africa, and have Mr. Rockefeller Hirisi maybe give us his perspective on the energy and fossil fuel industry sector there, and maybe what it can contribute in terms of lessons learned to the new sector development in Suriname and Guyana, and also in context of how we may design policy framework for US legislative advocacy. So Mr. Rockefeller, kindly take 10 minutes to express your thoughts.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I'd like to also thank the Institute for organizing this very important dialogue. And I welcome also the opportunity to participate with the fellow panelists today. As a Caribbean native, it's very fascinating for me to see some of the challenges in the West Africa, on the African continent, mirror a lot of the things and challenges that we have in the Caribbean. And it's very important that the Institute continues its long fight of making sure that Caribbean heritage remains at the forefront and Caribbean challenges remain at the forefront, because we have seen these challenges before in other parts of the world. And there's certainly opportunities to learn lessons from Africa. Where I am here in West Africa, we see examples of new markets, new finds. Liberia, for example, where there's some new finds. Sao Tome and Principe, where there's some new finds. But the challenges are the same. There's just not that much investment going on right now into those sectors, and everyone who are making new finds are coming at it with a very cautious approach. The types of resources that you normally would see going into these projects are not necessarily coming through. And of course, as you correctly noted, the enabling environment, the policy regime that's needed in these countries to make these types of projects take root are just not in place. Countries like Nigeria, Senegal, Cote d'Ivoire, further on south, you have Angola, Mozambique, Madagascar. These are countries that are rather well advanced in their both the regime, the political regime, as well as the policy regime, where we could learn lessons on how to develop blocks, oil blocks. In fact, we've even participated in efforts where we would take lessons from Cote d'Ivoire, a French-speaking country, and apply it to Liberia, where new finds are coming through, and putting auctions in the block and making blocks available for private investors to take root is the practice. How do we apply this in this climate? And pardon the pun, this is a time now where the major developers are not really running into this space because of either the climate policies that we see in the U.S. and the general attitude that the world has today with regards to carbonization. Everyone is moving towards decarbonization. So there is a lot to be said about this whole idea of how do you get your energy demands without necessarily going into the fossil fuels. And then of course, how do you develop your fossil fuels when there's still quite a bit of an appetite? We're trying to go to zero or zero carbon, reducing the greenhouse gas emissions in countries at home, but yet we're looking and exploring fossil fuel sources in other parts of the world. So this is a challenge that we're seeing in several countries where you say, I have the natural resource, I need it, I need the revenue that's going to come from it in order to develop my economy, to develop my nation, to get infrastructure, to develop health, the health center, healthcare, to provide education. There is a demand for the commodity, but yet the investment to develop the commodity are just not there. Right now, within the U.S. government, based on all the policies that are currently in place, and you'll hear Secretary Kerry, who's a special envoy for climate, make the plea, gone over to Mexico, for example, to tell Mexicans that you need to do better. You need to reduce your carbon footprint. You need to do your level best to get to reducing the amount of greenhouse gas and methane gas that's coming out of your country. We're sharing the border. The problems in Mexico are going to be affecting the continental US. And then of course, in the Caribbean, we know where all of the hurricanes originate out of the middle of the Atlantic and barrel down and hit the US. So we know the impact on climate of what's happening in the country, in the Caribbean. And I think a lot of that is causing a great deal of resistance to some degree on investors who are going to go into those markets to develop. So what does that mean for us in the Caribbean? It means that we have to become resourceful. We have to become innovative. We have to look for partnership first among ourselves, and then look for partnerships for out of nations that are not necessarily the traditional partners of the Caribbean. If the US is not leaning forward in terms of developing fossil fuels and developing finds that are in the Caribbean region, then there may be some other nations who may be inclined to make those types of investments and bring those resources and bring those assets to bear. Now, does that mean that the nations have to just rely on what is the natural coming out of the ground and the traditional sources of energy? I think this is the opportunity for us in the Caribbean. There are other sources of energy now. In fact, I spoke at a panel yesterday on the African energy landscape, where we're looking at green hydrogen. We're looking at already transforming offshore energy sources, where we haven't even begun to capitalize and fully maximize the onshore energy sources, where there are wind opportunities, where all that we could be doing with solar, hydro that we've always known. The idea is that the technologies that we need for our world tomorrow is just not quite there. We're not making the necessary investments. We're not diversifying the sources of intellect and intelligence and knowledge and science to the point where we're able to develop these technologies and newer technologies that would be available to help create energy in a different way. So I think the challenges before us in the Caribbean, we can surely continue to learn lessons from other countries that have developed those assets. But I say, if we're learning lessons of the old, then we're going to continue to be mired in the problems of the old. We should be looking at developing newer technologies and creating the problems of tomorrow, solving the problems of tomorrow beginning today by using these different approaches and different technologies and different talents that will help us develop these technologies. I think the conversation is very fascinating today, considering the nature of the topics that dominate the world. There'll be COP27 coming up in Egypt. It's very interesting how the COP conversations happen, where in our region seldom gets the type of attention. And by attention, I mean the attention in terms of dollars and pledges and commitments to help address the issues of the environment in our Caribbean region. So that too is an important conversation. So we cannot just remain in the traditional or working in the ways of the past. We have to get into the current dialogue. The current discussions that are going on today must continue to include the Caribbean region. I'll stop here and take any more comments from your able moderation, sir.
Dr. Hirisi, I really respect your comments. Right on point from the perspective of the African frontier. You are making observations not only of conventional fossil fuel industry, but of a call for decarbonization, a call for change, a call for diversification. These are all things we need to adopt in the new framework as we run forward with regional and conventional fossil fuel industry development there in Suriname and Guyana. I cannot speak on behalf of those countries and what their intentions are, but we can advocate that they adopt these mindsets as you are indicating, that are very, very important in context with the whole climate change, the whole climate risk debate. You understand? So there may, you know, and you will see from the oncoming panelists that are going to be presenting on green hydrogen concepts and how to leapfrog the fossil fuel mining into a green adaptation of energy utilization. I'm a trained environmentalist and I have made observations in the Caribbean. One of the areas that I'm particularly concerned about is the general region in between Venezuela and Trinidad that is suffering from plagues of years, of decades of oil contamination, oil and chemical contamination. It's getting into the ecosystem, it's getting into our food chain, it's becoming an issue. It's dissolving the what we call the blue economic value of these vast natural ecosystems. So these are important discussions for Suriname and Guyana, which pretty much remain pristine with the exception for land mining. Now they're now introduced to this liquid phase type of pollution risk due to this in this industry moving forward. So the next person I would like to bring forward is Jerry Butler, and I would like for you to maybe give a perspective on where you see the fossil fuel industry moving in context with your everyday experience managing new and renewable projects that are trying to come into the Caribbean sector. Can you kind of give your insight over the next 10 minutes? Do we have 10 minutes? What time does this panel finish? 3 o'clock?
Yes, it's
okay. So we have 10 minutes. Yeah. Give your perspective on where you sat at the highest level, seeing the Caribbean evolve economically, and now with this new Guyana, Suriname prospect for fossil fuel. How do you see the whole Caribbean shaping over the next few years in this whole debate?
Dennis, thank you very much, and a very pleasant good afternoon to my colleagues who are listening in and other members of the panel, Dr. Sergio and Dr. Rockefeller. I really appreciated your comments and your interest in our Caribbean space, or as Dr. Nelson calls it, the big ocean space, because we define ourselves as SID, small island developing states for the most part, and yet we're really islands with big ocean spaces, and we've never really harnessed the power of our oceans, both intellectually and our educational system. I mean, it's, if you're an anthropologist, you might say, well, because of slavery, but even right now where we are, most of our public school systems in Caribbean countries don't teach swimming. So mind you, if we're in Jamaica and we have Usain Bolt, or we're in the Bahamas and we have the greatest 400-meter runners, etc., we are really, really good in the Olympics on land. But I always try to tell my students in the Bahamas that the winningest country in the Olympics on a per capita basis is the Bahamas. But the first 2 gold medals that this country of 300,000 people actually got, when it was just a country of 60,000 people, was in sailing. And snipe sailing, we won 2 Olympics in a row, the gold medal, and that was in the 60s, and we never won it again. So we haven't done anything with the ocean, and I think that speaks multitudes of learning experience as to where we are now. So Uh, I I I've left the development system and left being vice president finance for the largest bank in the Caribbean to focus on ESG and climate change, which are my passions. And environmental, social, and governance issues, climate change have always been an area where I thought I could set up a practice where we could move the Caribbean forward. So I no longer frame myself as a development banker or even as a private banker or wealth manager, but I frame myself as a climate action citizen. And I do that within the context of most of us, we don't realize that all of our countries who we're talking about now have signed on to the UN, the United Nations Development Goals. First, it was the Millennium Development Goals. And now by 2030, we've made commitments under 17 SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. And within the context of the SDGs, there is a tremendous focus in SDG number 7 on access to affordable, clean energy, which is why 15 years ago, I started the Caribbean Renewable Energy Forum, where we focus on bringing funding, technical knowledge, capabilities, and access to the renewable energy space. So, and then believe it or not, Article 13, one of the SDG goals, number 13, is climate action. So we're not here discussing the Caribbean legislative framework for Caribbean American Heritage Month with some sort of micro initiative. This is a macro initiative where our countries have signed on, the US has signed on, the world has signed on. And when we were at COP26 in Glasgow, Scotland, it was very interesting to see how the small island states interacted with the big countries and what was the focus. You know, we left with the theme 1.5 to stay alive. That's, you know, getting us down below 1.5 Celsius. So our oceans don't rise and take us out. And we also focus on how do we mobilize this $100 billion that was pledged way back in Paris at COP21 when Barack Obama was president. And it was pledged that they would initiate $100 billion to, 1, take climate action, and 2, mobilize a transition from fossil fuels, which is considered one of the major reasons on why the earth is overheating, to green energy. And this transition and this funding and this technological expertise that's supposed to go into this transition has never really come about. And think about it, it's 2022, and we made these commitments to get this done by 2030. So within the context of the conventional energy space, so yesterday, I didn't go to the CHOGM meeting, the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Kigali, Rwanda, which is going on right now. I thought I would have been a delegate to the youth forum, but there were funding discrepancies on who could go and who would travel, et cetera. So I've been online, but yesterday there was a statement made by Gaston Brown, the Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda, and it was a very powerful statement. I can't make it because that would affect my practice efforts in Guyana and Suriname and Trinidad and Tobago. But he said, your money is dirty oil money. And he said, your dirty oil money is as dirty as the money you were trying to get us to find when you blacklist us for drug money and money laundering. And when he called the oil money dirty oil money, figuratively and also directly tongue-in-cheek, you should see that audience. Can't believe a prime minister said that. But the truth of the matter is, the oil sector, meaning the fossil fuel sector, is heavily subsidized by taxpayers' money. And this is an industry who, through lobbying, has managed to get taxpayers to give them tax benefits and subsidies to get more oil. And that oil, which is quote unquote dirtying up the atmosphere is what is creating the situation that's affecting us in the Caribbean. And in effect, if this thing doesn't get taken care of, it's estimated by 2050 that most of us in these small island states in the Caribbean, we will become climate refugees. So if they don't look after us now and help us with adaptation and mitigation and with some level of resilience, eventually, could you imagine, eventually we'll all move to Florida, and then when Florida starts to sink, we'll all move up to New York. And do you want a bunch of Caribbean people in New York? Oh Lord, there'll be carnival every single day, or in Washington, carnival every day. So there is a method to this madness as to how we work to get funding into the Caribbean to deal with this SDG goal of climate action and of access to clean, affordable energy. So now we have this conundrum where basically, and most people don't realize 25% of Barbados's energy is Barbados has energy extraction too, but Barbados is a tourist country. We don't talk about it, but let's focus on the big boys: Trinidad and Tobago, Guyana, and Suriname. And we've heard the honorable former minister from Suriname speak about Suriname, which in some respects is on the same path as Guyana. Prior to this big looming thing, the pandemic, Guyana was expected by the IMF 3 years ago to grow at 86%, the fastest growing economy in the whole world. Even after the pandemic, it's still projected to grow at 46%, fastest growing country in the world. And this is all due to this 11 billion barrels and the move to extract it. And what does that mean for the wealth and progress of the nation? You know, back in 2005, I worked on a project in Guyana where there was a focus on preserving Guyana's rainforest, and the Red Fund from Norway actually gave Guyana over $100 million, not to touch its rainforest, but to preserve it as the lungs of the earth and to spend it on renewable energy projects. Now $100 million for Guyana versus $1 billion in oil revenue. I think they're going to make a different choice. So the question we have with our 3 Caribbean neighbors who are members of our family, Suriname, Guyana, and Trinidad, is how do we balance their progress? Because, you know, after Haiti, Guyana was one of the highly indebted poor countries in the Caribbean. How do we balance their economic success given their newfound wealth in oil versus the green energy transition that we know is required so the rest of us in the family could survive? The same applies to Suriname. And the answer to how we do this is not going to be static. It has to be a dynamic type of testing. And yes, with South-South cooperation, we can learn from our African brothers and sisters on how they manage their situations and what it is they're doing with carbon sequestration, what types of crops might work better to help with this situation. And then, of course, how do we deal with the fact that we have these oceans that are the sinks, you know, basically the sinks and washboards of the world that are in the Caribbean that help with carbon sequestration, and what is their value and worth, and who should be paying to preserve these oceans like they're paying to preserve the rainforest so that these can help with saving the planet. So with that being said, I think that there's no silver bullet on how to handle the progress that Suriname, Guyana, and Trinidad will be making. There's a lot of excitement, and I want to end with one distinguishing thought, and that is that, you know, a lot of people think Trinidad is full of oil, but I tell all my Trinidadian buddies, man, y'all are full of gas. And first they get upset, then they start to laugh, like Dennis is laughing now. And believe it or not, in the renewable energy transition space, gas is considered a transition fuel. Is not so dirty as slow speeds sludge or diesel, which a lot of our generation plants are using, but gas itself is cleaner. And Trinidad doesn't give any of us gas in the region, but it sure makes a lot of money and it sustains their economy exporting clean, and I say that with tongue in cheek, clean gas to the rest of the world as a transition fuel to help with the transitioning from straight out fossil fuels to clean energy like solar, hydro, wind, etc. And I guess later on in my later session, we'll talk about hydrogen and the prospects of hydrogen being made as green hydrogen, which makes it a cleaner fuel, but not indeed a renewable energy. So Dennis, I tried to round up my comments on two
Well
conventional energy guys, and
Well said.
I'm ready to move on.
I have some good takeaways from your commentary. One is that the oceans are the sink, the world's sink and washing board. That is so correct. And I never even thought about protecting the ocean with the same type of mandates and programs we do for rainforests. That is so correct. Even though I collaborate with a lot of ocean protectors, I'm gonna keep this one in my back pocket. Now, your transition remarks were very powerful. Clearly, you clearly indicated you are stepping out from a big corporate world that handled financing to more being a citizen to protect the planet, and watching two of our bigger neighboring countries, Guyana and Suriname, adopt this whole fossil fuel industry. And obviously, yes, you're right. Those comments that came out of Rwanda is sort of like mudslinging our fellow countrymen who are in commandership to steer this thing properly. But we as advocates, we do play an important role as professional advocates to help maneuver how they transition the industry into a more cleaner, decarbonized approach. So I wanted to make reference to that. While we pay attention to all the prospects of wealth coming from new oil finds, left behind is our fellow country, Haiti, where I only recently saw a film that was made a few months ago, that their fuel source is based on deforestation and kerosene importation. Okay, how can we leave a country to still run on lanterns, which I was shocked to see Port-au-Prince is fueled up by lanterns, those lanterns from the 1800s that we used to walk to the outhouse with. This nation is still going through that experience in the year 2022. I was shocked. So this brings a great segue for me to introduce one of the, I would say, most trailblazing hydrogen energy technology I have yet seen. I have worked over the last 5 years with another emerging hydrogen technology, which itself was innovative and NASA endorsed. But this one is as compelling. And let me introduce.
Hey, Dennis, just a small interlude, and I digress, because I can't help but chime in on the Haiti comment, a country that I know quite well.
Okay.
It's been several years in, and I often fight the disinformation that continues relative to Haiti. For instance, it has been long known that Haiti may, in fact, have several resources within oil and gas. And there have been some exploration of oil in Haiti, albeit we may not be entirely in line with the national and international norms. That's one aspect. And so a part of it is really trying to assist the government of Haiti in making sure that the oil exploration that they might be interested and will be needed taking place that is done, and some technical assistance might be provided relative to that. Another aspect of what you mentioned in terms of the lanterns, a lot of people don't know that there is a certain affection of Haitians for the barbecue, the certain flavor that comes from the wood. And there are billions of dollars that's being made with regard to the use of wood for cooking. So I want to temper the sense of the archaicness of Haiti and the electrification that is well needed, that the late President Jovenel Moïse was working on in terms of trying to bring 24-hour electricity to Haiti. And there is a lot of need in that respect as well. I'll stop there. I don't want to tarry too much.
I'm glad you mentioned these things, because I believe the next presenter will probably shed light onto possibilities for assisting the Haiti energy sector needs. So let me go into the next speaker.
Sorry, Dennis. I have to say something about what Erica said, particularly when it comes to our sister country, Haiti. You know, at SOA, at Summit of the Americas, there were some comments made by the Bahamas on how important it was to solve the political and the macro situation in Haiti, because obviously the migration of Haitians to the Bahamas, whether they're there to stay or whether they're on their way to Florida, and the number of deaths we have on the high seas is unconscionable. And the fact that Haitians are turned away after making that journey and sent back to a place that is at a political impasse is, I mean, I always say there's a little bit of Haiti in all of us, and the Caribbean can never think of itself as being an evolved society if 12 million of us, the largest population, by the way, I mean, the Dominican Republic is perhaps 13, but Haiti at 12,500,000 people. It can't stay the way it is, and there has to be a different way of approaching or looking at the Haiti situation. And I don't have the solution. I've been there during earthquakes, and I've done a lot of work in Haiti. But I will say that at this year's at my Caribbean Renewable Energy Forum on April the 26th, we had a delegation of 13 people at the government and the utility level and at the regulatory level do an expose on Haiti. And the most promising thing for me was the more practical innovation, which is the creation of microgrids. In other words, a central grid led by a utility where people are stealing electricity, or the utility is at best anemic in providing electricity because the T&D lines are just not there, just didn't seem to work. So microgrids, and these microgrids, some of them being powered by solar farms, and then of course there was a dam project that was producing electricity for a microgrid. Those ended up being very interesting and practical investment opportunities for Caribbean and US investors in Haiti. And I'd be happy to talk about those investment opportunities in renewable energy in Haiti. So I just want to pile on to what Eric said. I agree with Eric. Haiti is not a lost cause. And until Haiti is fixed for the Caribbean, all of us are failing.
Yeah, I should mention my career was founded in Haiti as a professional sustainable development practitioner in the area of poverty alleviation. It is that project, Designing Poverty Alleviation Master Plan for Haiti, which launched our Vihara Foundation, which model is now being tested in India, which we are going to bring back into Haiti as soon as our concert fundraising program kicks off in August. So yeah, Haiti has a lot of good things coming to it. That for sure, I can assure you. So, and I'd be happy to discuss that more with Eric and Dr. Hirisi and yourself.
Yeah, Dr. Harris.
That is. So let me proceed to introduce Benjamin Mamola. Benjamin is a C-level executive with both corporate and emerging growth company experience, educated both in engineering and financing, and spent 14 years in investment banking, and left the industry in 2004 to start Nano Delivery Technology Company, which he ran for 10 years. So recently, I'm trying to cut through the bio here so I could fast track his company quickly grew. Benjamin has become able to quickly adapt to market changes. He grew multiple technologies from startup to global commercialization. He's strategically utilizing an extensive network of trusted relationship to expedite business development. In 2001, Benjamin became the CEO of IGES America LLC, a hydrogen power generation company, and he has grown the company to over 6.5 gigawatts of power generation contracts. IGES is an American company incorporated in Delaware with offices in Woodcliff, New Jersey, Woodcliff Lake, New Jersey. So Benjamin Mamola, the floor is yours. It is now 2:06. You may speak.
Dennis, you're appearing as two Dennis. Is that
Dennis's name is showing up on mine. No.
Yeah, we had some technical glitches. So we are trying to sort these things out. But more important is the message. So at 2:07, why don't you take 15 minutes thereabout to explain your technology and the impact it can have in the Caribbean, and how this can be a transition technology for complementing the fossil fuel sector that is emerging on a large scale in the South American region.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Dennis, and really appreciate being a part of this panel. It's really an honor. One part of my past that wasn't explained is I ran an EPC, an engineering, procurement, and construction company for 5 years prior to becoming CEO of IGS America. And in doing the EPC work, I worked on energy efficiency engineering and renewable energies for mostly, Fortune 100 manufacturing companies. And in part of doing that work, I always sought to look for innovative technologies that could make a difference with our clients, could make a difference in the world. And 2 years ago, I came across this hydrogen technology. And I will say at the beginning, I was in somewhat of disbelief that it could actually work. I almost walked away from it. I'm glad I did not, because after I really got behind the curtains and explored it, and I wouldn't say it's not a disruptive technology. It's an evolutionary technology. So we developed two avenues. Let me start with our current core business, which is power production using hydrogen. When you hear hydrogen, everyone says, well, the only way you can make it green is using wind or solar. And then you have your gray hydrogen, which is using fossil fuels to generate the electrolyzers. The electrolyzer breaks down the H2O molecule to hydrogen and oxygen. And in the past, the electrolyzers that currently exist and were being used took, let's say, $1 of input power to generate maybe 60 to 70 cents of output power. So if you think about it, you're producing hydrogen using fossil fuels. It's kind of defeating the whole purpose. What we discovered, and this has been developed over 10 years. So this is not a startup company. I just got introduced and I was asked to be the CEO of North America, which is the United States, Canada, Mexico, and the Caribbean. Since that time, the company has grown quite a bit. The way the technology works is quite simple. Standard electrolyzers break down the hydrogen and oxygen. Everyone knows that. It's been around for a long time. The challenge has been the efficiency of that technology. What we discovered is by modifying the surface area of the electrolyzer using standard materials and applying a proprietary control system, we're able to amplify the release of hydrogen by 30 times, which means on a 1.25 megawatt generator, to use as an example, we have 1 megawatt net output power, and the only fuel source is wastewater or salt water. So we're able to generate a dramatically over unity system using wastewater. I say wastewater because we don't want to go and take potable water from states like California where they're having drought situations. We want to take water that is either in the ocean, like we talked about earlier, wastewater going down the drain, gray water, it can be any type of water and does not have to be purified. So the system is very, very elegant. We have two pieces of equipment. One is considered a kinetic reactor that prepares the water for a more efficient release from the molecule. Then we have our proprietary electrolyzer that releases the hydrogen at the 30 times multiple. We apply that to standard generators. So we're working in collaboration with Caterpillar. We can apply it to any type of generator. So on the Caribbean islands where you have existing power production using diesel or oil, we could modify those gen sets to do two things. One, we can convert to 100% hydrogen, or we also have a hydrogen diesel eco fuel that we call it. We can modify the engines to incorporate an activated water, which accentuates the hydrogen portion of the water to be combustible and do a blend with diesel. Now, we've done this before, so this is not, again, a startup. It takes some modifications of the machine. We have to do some modifications to the head. We have to add some sort of the controls and the kinetic reactor. But we've been able to run diesel generators on 90% hydrogen, 10% diesel. Now, I'm not against oil and gas. I think the assets in the ground that you're talking about is tremendous. We have partnered with oil and gas companies where we are bringing hydrogen power production to drill for the oil. So the oil and gas companies are able to claim a decrease in their carbonization while they're still drilling for oil, which we all know is going to be around for decades to come. The beautiful part of our technology is it's scalable. We can go from small scale to 1 megawatt to 10 megawatt. We're working on a 1.7 gigawatt project in the United States. In the last 12 months, we have secured substantial project financing. One of our oil and gas partners has contributed a refinery as an asset. So we are qualified as a UN-approved investment. Our company has written and authored 2 UNFCCC methodologies for the United Nations. When we talk about the SDGs for the UN, right off the bat, we hit 7 of the boxes. And if we get creative, we can hit 14 out of the 17. We are partnered with the United Nations on developing green cities worldwide, which is a new initiative that we just started. The exciting part of what we do is we're not going into the market competitive. For example, you have diesel distributors that are dropping diesel off, let's say at the shores of the islands. We would partner with those distributors because the profitability of the hydrogen technology is so much greater than selling diesel that we can enter into a profit share with the distributors, maximize their value, probably increase their revenue and profitability, and work in combination. We also work with public and private partnerships, really open to being creative in any way we can. We are right now, in the past 12 months, we've signed on contracts for over 6.5 gigawatts of power contracts. We own and operate those facilities. Again, we're working in collaboration with the big equipment manufacturers. And because we don't use rare earth materials, we're able to produce our technology without major supply chain issues. We're not going to some very minute country in the world to get some specialty metal. It's standard. But here's where it's very exciting as well. Because of the efficiency level of the electrolyzer, we're able to reduce the size of it by 90%. So if you think about the future potential hydrogen vehicles, the challenge has been that the electrolyzers weigh 400 pounds and there's no room and you use up all of the space in the trunk. We've been able to develop a 90% smaller version that can literally go under the vehicles and run the car on water. Now, again, we don't want to jump in and transform the world tomorrow. That's not our goal. But we have to evolve from 100% fossil fuels to a greener energy. But the reality is we all know solar and wind has its limitations. The other thing we're hearing from the solar and wind part is, the environmental impact of destroying farmland and installing solar panels. There's a lot of negativity associated with it and the lack of efficiency. Hydrogen is a better vehicle. Now, I think, Jerry, you mentioned it can't really be called a renewable energy because we do use water as a fuel source, but we can capture the emissions, which is water vapor, and recirculate that. So we have what's called an EGR, which is an exhaust gas recirculation system that allows us to capture the vapor and reuse it as fuel. To put things in direct perspective so you understand how it works, for every megawatt of power we generate, we only need about 75 gallons of water per hour. And again, that can be ocean water, wastewater, gray water. We also can recirculate portions of that. So let's say we can cut that down by 50%. So the technology has been proven and verified by third parties. We have substantial project financing in behind us. We are an improved UN partner, building and working in collaboration with them. We are also speaking with several secretaries of energy and a number of the states here and working with the large utility companies where we are going to provide them power so they can resell it wholesale. So I'll stop and open up for questions because you guys don't know me, but I can talk for hours. It's a very exciting technology.
Can you speak a little bit about the hydrogen diesel blending? Can we use it for the trucking fishery sector?
Yes, that's a very exciting one. So the reason we started with the diesel hydrogen combination is because there was a tremendous resistance to hydrogen going back 10, 12 years ago. We're fortunate now that there's a push for it, but the technology was originally developed to be a combination of diesel and hydrogen. We did a 5-year study in the port of Antwerp where we converted ferry boats to a combination of diesel and hydrogen, and we monitored it for 5 years. Since that time, we've been able to increase the percentage of hydrogen. So we can retrofit vehicles, trucks, buses to be running on 10% diesel, 90% hydrogen. Now, it's really important that I say this. The hydrogen we're producing is on demand. So there's no compression, there's no risk of danger. It goes from water to hydrogen right into the combustion chamber. So yes, Dennis, we can do modifications on ships, buses, again, vehicles. That's not our core business, but if the right application came along, we would be more than willing to jump in and support that part of your progress.
Okay. All right. I'll be driving up to New Jersey to have my car retrofitted.
We're actually, for the sake of a proof of concept, we're retrofitting a Hellcat motor to 100% hydrogen. So that's a good project we're working on.
I'm serious. I'm going to drive to New Jersey, look for you.
Well, the thing is also with the increase in the diesel prices, we have to do something because that ripple effect of the cost of transportation, and Jerry, you mentioned this on our conversation, is rippling into food costs and all these other inflationary issues. So if we can just even reduce it by 50% to start, and maybe 90% we can do, but let's say just to not rock the world and get everybody upset at us, reduce it 20, 30, 40, 50% in your power production and your plants. The other thing I want to mention is because the technology is so elegant and we have an output power greater than our input power, we can produce hydrogen as a commodity. So let's say we did convert a power plant on one of the islands and we now 100% green, we can produce excess power to produce hydrogen and have that hydrogen be a big export for the island, generating substantial revenue to the government. So there's just a lot of things we can do. And we're very, very open to partnering. Again, we're not trying to be competitive with everything. We want to be collaborative. But as a company, we have philanthropic goals as well. We want to make a difference. Again, I'm at the age where, just making money is great. But if we can't make a difference in the world and help people, then shame on us. So anyway, I'll open up for questions if there's any more.
Benjamin?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Dennis.
I was telling you yesterday, I was surprised. I did some work in the British Virgin Islands, and I was surprised their national energy plant has a huge diesel tank, which a ship pulls up every week or 2 weeks and pumps fuel in there to power up the country. I mean, it was unbelievable. But anyway, go ahead, Mr. Walker.
Yes. So Benjamin, some of us are not new to some of the new innovative technologies that seem to almost be a panacea for some of the resource or energy challenges that we have, whether it be in the small Caribbean or huge African countries. But we've never been able to actually, the proof of concept is one aspect of it, but we always seem to have a real challenge as far as getting a proof of concept actually in one of the respective countries. Is there a particular country, for example, that you're targeting so that you could say, well, we've demonstrated that it does work there? What exactly would it take, for example, for us to facilitate an engagement where this thing can really be looked at seriously? What would be the need to get started, if you don't
Well,
mind?
we already have a generation system up and running in Germany that we use as our pilot and demo site. We are creating one in the United States.
Let's
Sorry?
think South, right? Let's think Caribbean, let's think Africa for a moment.
Okay.
Because that's the other aspect. There are some natural environments in countries like Germany where there's a lot of innovation, research, and so supports that do not necessarily exist in some of the South countries.
Well, I
So-
think what you're suggesting is there a way to get a system up and running in one of these countries in order to
Exactly.
demo it? So what I would suggest, we can look for a small project, let's say a 1 megawatt project. We don't need any funding. We have our own funding. So if we were to get a PPA contract put in place, say for 1 megawatt for an application,
Yes.
whether it be to the government or to a hotel resort or anything, we'll build it. And then we can use that as the showcase site to expand from there.
So,
Now, again, Dennis?
yeah, I wanted to, I have to move to the next speaker in the interest of time and then bring it back to questions and answer. So if you can hold that thought and develop that answer further, because the next thing they're going to ask you is, how are we going to finance it? And we want to cover that, so to give the sense of confidence that you have the full package. So let me move into the next speaker, which is Mr. Michael Elley, E-L-L-E-Y. Somehow the Zoom system is having glitches today, messing up everybody's name. I do apologize for that. Michael Elley is a very unique individual in that for the last 40 years, he has been working with NASA-based research aimed to generate data for space shuttle exercises around the concept of growing water hyacinth, harnessing water hyacinth for biofuels and for food production, high-value food production. They have mastered the art of harnessing water hyacinth, which is native to Guyana and Suriname and Brazil and Venezuela. Native, that's where it came from, floating in all the open water bodies. They harvest this thing, they process it, they cake it, they squeeze the oil out, and they manufacture a whole bunch of different products for food and whatever he will be able to explain to you. But this is the newest of the industry. His latest venture is, I believe, an 80-mile channel that is growing this thing in Vietnam that they're going to crank up soon. And we are working with Michael to get him into India, where this is an invasive species. He's getting contracts to develop this system to clean up lakes in Louisiana. What Michael has done is absolutely groundbreaking. So I want to turn the floor over to him. Michael, you have 15, we'll take 15 minutes for you to do your song and dance.
Thank you, Dennis. To do a little explanation, I was introduced 37 years ago to Godofredo Mansad Jr. from the Philippines, who developed 42 different products from the water hyacinth, which can feed, clothe, house, and heal the world from an aquatic weed that costs nothing to grow and which will replicate itself 45 to 50,000 times per plant if given the opportunity. Is this, am I functioning? You can see me all right? I can't see myself.
We see you good.
Okay, we're good.
Well, you want to
All
share
right.
screen?
Pardon me?
You want to share screen?
No, I'm
Okay,
just,
good.
I'm just,
Okay, you're good, you're good.
okay, I'm just making sure that this information is going forward. This give you an idea. Mansad was brought out from underneath the Marcos regime by NASA, having sent Battelle Laboratories to investigate Mansad's findings and validating that. When NASA wanted to use water hyacinth in outer space because it was 100% usable, it grew off of the toxins and nutrients in fresh water, and the applications went on and on and on. And just to give you an idea, high protein, excuse me, vitamin A, B12, B6, vitamin E, currency grade paper pulp, never have to cut down another tree for paper, clothing fibers second only to cotton, 4 different kinds of antibacterial solution, non-toxic insecticide, non-toxic food preservative, medicinal alcohol, wine, base for cosmetics and salves, and the dregs make particle board and cork. And then about 6 years ago, I got introduced to a young man by the name of David Baer, who has created biodiesel from an unlimited resource, which can generate everything that the last speaker was mentioning. We'll supply you all of the biodiesel and you create the hydrogen from it, okay? Or add that to the process. Giving you an understanding, we've been negotiating with Vietnam for the past several months. Prior to that, my partner had been negotiating with them for several years. And the gentleman who was his partner at the time, who was also the funder of this project, died. And so did that project. Then time goes by. I'm introduced to David. I get a contact from a gentleman in Vietnam wanting to know if I'd ever been in Vietnam. And I said, no, but I have a project for you. Well, that gentleman turns out to be the same man that David had been dealing with 6 years ago. And so we've gone forward with this project. To give you a concept, we are able to create 30 million gallons of biodiesel, which will, and a year, by the by, and that would net somewhere between 60 to 80 million dollars annually per facility. And those facilities can be cookie cuttered anywhere that you want to go. What's been lacking in this whole situation is someone who realizes the value and realizes that what that can be brought to bear in any country, let alone the countries that we've been talking with here related to the Caribbean. You have biodiesel in you have water hyacinth in 52 nations of the world, most of which are emerging nations. Add that to another product that I've been working with for the past several years, which is KENAF, K-E-N-A-F. The reason I bring this up, we just had the oil of KENAF evaluated by a biodiesel company in North Carolina, and they said, this is wonderful, and how much can you deliver? Well, KENAF also is probably one, if not the number one, carbon sequestering plant. It'll absorb 8 times its own weight per plant per cycle of growth. So if you can use both of these in efforts in and around and through the Caribbean, where this plant grows easily, we just harvested 160 acres in Belize. What I wanted to point out, not only that the core of the plant, you've got 2 major fiber continuations. The bast fiber, which is the outer core, and the core itself. The core has been used for numerous years for oil purification. Where there's spilled oil, this oil socks made from the center of the KENAF plant absorbs 12 times its own weight in spilled oil. Now you take these 2 plants together, both of them can be grown and are growing in most of your countries that we've been talking about here today. But come back to the water hyacinth. What's impressive about that, you can set up industries that'll have an impact on a worldwide basis. And the one thing that I want to mention is, and this has been my focus from day one, my company is called Ultimate Earth Inc. And our byline on this is non-waste technology. Use everything, work with the environment, not against it. No waste in the product. We're able to use the whole plant. And here it comes back to the factor that you can feed, clothe, house, and heal the world from an aquatic weed that costs absolutely nothing to grow. Conceptually, Dennis mentioned India. There's enough water hyacinth in the Calcutta region of India to feed all of India. There's enough water hyacinth in India to feed all of Asia. But this plant originated in the Amazon River Basin in Brazil and was taken around the world by the Japanese because of the flowers that happen one time a month. That plant is fully grown, able to replicate itself in 28 days. And so you're dealing with a plant that has become a major pariah in most of these countries, because if it gets started, you're going to have that forever and ever, amen. And nobody's doing anything with it. And what they've used it for is strictly for the 5% that's the fiber, and they throw away the 95%, which is where all of these other products come from. So from the standpoint of the impact of what that would do in the Caribbean, you have a plant that is unlimited. You have an opportunity to develop industries around that plant. And instead of spending millions upon millions of dollars a year in trying to kill it, you harvest it. And so in combination with what all of these gentlemen have been talking about, the applications go on forever. But more importantly is you never run out of something that costs nothing to grow. I hope you heard that. Nothing to grow. It just feeds off the toxins and nutrients in fresh water, period. And the only reason the entire world is not covered with it is that the only thing that kills it is salt water. Otherwise, the entire world would be covered with water hyacinth. So from the standpoint of the applications, that goes on forever. From the standpoint of the impact to any nation, if they would just harvest a plant that costs nothing. Now, you're not wasting land. You're not having to talk about not growing a crop. You can grow crops wherever you want to grow crops, because this one is in an area that nobody basically uses and that costs nothing to grow. And we can feed the world. And I mentioned this morning, and I'll mention to this cadre of folk today, my belief is nobody has to go to bed hungry. No one, nowhere. We have the natural resources. We have the supply. What has been lacking in pretty much across the board is the funding to bring these projects and products to the market. And if you gentlemen have access to that, Katie, bar the door, my friends, because this can be launched in a heartbeat.
All right. So when you talk about these things, I'm thinking about these vast agricultural countries, Suriname and Guyana, with all these farming equipment using this biodiesel now blended with hydrogen. So I don't know if that's a great mix, but these things will create jobs. And what's better is, you said the fiber part, right?
Right.
Can be bulked and maybe shipped to Haiti to manufacture cardboard or something. I don't know.
Yes.
So I'm just thinking out the box here. But I want to thank all the speakers. We have half an hour left, and I want to make productive use of the time to see how this discussion can link back to the U.S. Legislative Week mandate to create that white paper advocacy to get support to move these projects into action into the Caribbean. And it's not only financial support, it could be technical resource support, it could be research and development support, it could be hand-holding support, it could be any kind of support that you identify. So I would like to see these innovative technology in the space of hydrogen and biofuel complement the emergence of the fossil fuel industry, where there's a trade-off, and we don't necessarily have to take a 100% approach that is hurtful to the planet. So I'm open up the floor for further discussions. I know there was some questions aimed at Benjamin. So take it away.
So I know we're in the renewable energy section of our discussion on energy. And in the case of Mike and the plan, I know you mentioned there were 56 countries where this plant effectively grows wild as a weed. And when you say
52.
when you say weed, that scares Caribbean people, okay?
Understood.
But I at CREF 8 years at the Caribbean Renewable Energy Forum meeting 8 years ago, we went to Cuba and we looked at a plant called Jatropha.
Yes.
And at CREF, we put together a financing arrangement. At the time, the US was opening up to Cuba. Cuba was considered an active part of the Caribbean. And the financing plan involved a former minister for energy and environment from the UK who had married a Cuban lady. They one of the first private companies in Cuba. And Germany was going to manufacture the equipment because the plant is quite tall and it came with thorns. But it had all of the qualities that you described in terms of its cellulosic capability and its biofuel capability. And that grew well in Cuba, and there was enough in Cuba to produce energy for the entire Caribbean. Like Cuba was in the Caribbean. I know you mentioned Belize, which is in the Caribbean, and
Yes.
you mentioned a project there. So are there any other, I know for a fact that since the Bahamas has no mountains and therefore we have no rivers, and therefore all of our water is either brackish or salt water, that we probably would kill this hyacinth off in a jiffy, unless we found out we could smoke it. And then we would find a way to grow it. So my first question on that, and simple question, was, what are the countries in the Caribbean besides Belize where we might find this hyacinth? And in terms of the economic model for it, because I know you ended with the need for funding to turn it into a viable agriculture project. Is there an economic model that you could send us to that talks about, if we produce 1 hectare of it, what would be the benefit going on?
Let me give you an idea, and I think that this may help. First of all, I mentioned that this plant had originated in the Amazon River basin. Every country surrounding the Amazon, surrounding Brazil, has this as a major problem. It was brought to the United States at the end of the 1800s. The plants were left with the folks. They didn't want to carry the plants back. They put them in their ponds. The ponds filled up virtually immediately. The folks started throwing them into the bayous and the rivers and the lakes. Well, then along comes our illustrious government in its own inimitable fashion, stating this was the Corps of Engineers. They said, we know how to handle this situation. They dynamited it. And every little piece grew. So this is, we spend millions upon millions of dollars here. Now, I know in talking with Dennis, his particular country has lots of water hyacinth. I know that this is throughout Central and South America. And your statement related to not having rivers or not having lakes, Puerto Rico, I just recently found, has had a major problem in a major lake, which I would have never assumed that they had a problem with water hyacinth at all. So that's another discussion that's underway. I can't answer specifically some of these questions that you're asking because I just don't know. Okay, that hasn't been my focus. But the thing about it is, it's very easily handled from the standpoint of what you're able to do to create an renewable, ongoing energy source that can be used in so many different applications. And with CANAF being a carbon, probably the #1 carbon sequestering plant, maybe followed by water hyacinth in all sincerity, you have the opportunity of not only carbon credits, but you also have a situation that you're going to be able to feed the planet. And one thing I wanted to mention, which triggered, you can do this from the standpoint of totally mechanical, or you can do it also from the standpoint of hiring lots of people to harvest the water hyacinth, for an example. You can have lots of people working. That's the reason that Vietnam is interested, because we can put a whole lot of their folks to work.
So Michael, question for you, because, and I know probably the former minister Akimboto can speak on this. I know that there are very important waterways, lakes between Guyana and Suriname, that has been contaminated because of the, I think the phosphorus that's used in gold
the mining
Yes.
industry.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah,
This
when they
will
wash
pull.
when they wash off the gold.
All right.
That is correct.
This also is something that you need to know. What it can't use for its own ingestion and growth, it can pull heavy metal waste out of that water and hold it in suspension in the root systems, and it can be reclaimed. That's a discussion that we're having in Florida related to phosphorus specifically. So from that, does that answer your question, sir?
Well, it somewhat. I wondered whether or not. Well, an aspect of it is answered. I wondered whether or not it can play a role in decontaminating the waterways.
Absolutely, and it's used
yeah.
that way. That's used extensively here in the United States as a tertiary system. In Los Angeles, San Diego, I know they're doing the same thing in Florida, in Orlando. So it pulls the waste and the toxins out of fresh water. That's what it does. That's what it thrives on.
So Dennis, let me just say that I know that the brilliant, our leader, Dr. Claire Nelson, and some of her able advisors, to include Dennis, that we sounds as if we have a lot in common in terms from an international development perspective. So I appreciate your guidance and leadership there. But we have some people around the table, of course, to include our capable Jerry Butler, who's he's always out there, you know, and we always lean on him. But we'd certainly like to see if maybe we could find an appropriate environment, whether it be in Suriname with former Minister Akimboto. You know, we may have some ideas around how to gain some entry. So let's talk about that at some point. I'm not going to tarry too much on that right now.
Michael, you sign his NDA, he can show you the actual presentation, the machinery to pull the stuff out of the water, how they crush it, how they cake it, how they oil it, whatever.
Yeah, but we have to build okay, so we've got Jatropha, we've got Kenneth, we've got the water lily, and then because of the historical significance of the US war against drugs, we've got the Jamaican push for hemp and marijuana, and the economic model that says if you produce a hectare of this is what it's worth in terms of its cellulotic capabilities, its herb, its medicinal capabilities, etc. It's something that we would have to develop, Mike.
He has that
around that, and then if that is the case, then I'm sure I could bring a financing matrix to it so that it could be prototyped. I'm interested in what you're doing in Belize. But we don't have.
Can I answer?
We wouldn't have the time. We wouldn't have the time in this forum, so we'll take it off.
Yeah, we'll take it offline.
I'm tied to completing this like at 3 o'clock on the renewable energy side. I want to jump to Benjamin on hydro, because I said I had 2 quick questions. So Benjamin, on hydrogen, I know so I have found when we were trying to retrofit some of the slow speed diesel generators, legacy equipment that is with these utilities, right? That there's a big question about warranty from the manufacturer. For example, just very recently, I had $107 million worth of equipment from Wärtsilä, who I know, I mean, you're in hydrogen, you know, Wärtsilä is one of the biggest manufacturers of the diesel generators in the Caribbean.
Yes.
And it took about 6 years to finance and build that system. And this one is unique because, Benjamin, it's tri-fuel. It could run off of LNG, so it was designed to bring in US LNG. It could run off of diesel, heavy sludge, and it could run off of ethanol/gasoline. So in the case of where you retrofit an engine to run off of hydrogen or a hydrogen blend, I wanted to know if you have relationships with these manufacturers. Germany, it was in the Netherlands. I can't remember where. Anyway, these manufacturers, where if you retrofit it, they will still honor their warranties.
Yes, we went down that
they had
path.
with the utilities.
Yes, we have. And we started initially with Caterpillar, and we were able to demonstrate that with the retrofit of the diesels, we're actually able to extend the life of the equipment because we're actually running at lower temperatures and increased efficiency. So we were able to maintain warranty. Now with Wärtsilä, we'd have to go through the same process, but I don't see that as a rate limiting step. Also, because we have substantial project financing behind us, we've been given authorization that we can, in the right scenario, take on the warranty risk and finance it. So if we were in a situation where they said no, but you guys still wanted to move forward, we would put funding in place to protect the warranty that we would walk away from. But I would go down the warranty path first, like we did with Caterpillar. There's no reason we couldn't qualify the tech to work in the way that we did with Caterpillar gensets and get the warranty coverage extended. I don't see an issue with that at all. And I know, Eric, you mentioned a question about, setting up a small pilot. We could do it where if there's a contract for PPA, we don't ask for any money up front. We never do. It's all contingent. So we would build it, we'd finance it, and we only generate revenue if we deliver. But a couple points, and actually, Michael, you brought that up, and I'm really intrigued by your technology too. I'd like to talk to you offline. But the ability to generate additional revenue with the carbon credits is very substantial. And to quantify what value it is, for every megawatt of power generated using our hydrogen, we can sell over $500,000 in carbon credits. Now think about the megawatts on the islands. We can enter into a partnership with the government where we do a profit share on the carbon trading side. Instead of being CO2 emitting countries, we can slowly evolve to being CO2 free and sell those credits to the European nations for right now it's $90 a ton. So there's just so many opportunities, but because we come with financing, that's the good thing. We're not asking anybody to write a check. We already have our financing in place. And if it's a qualified project, we're very supportive.
I want to make sure you say that with a margin of confidence, because most projects the showstopper for most projects is who's going to pay for the feasibility study.
Right.
So how you get over that hump? I mean, unless a government finances or private sector finances the feasibility study to say, yeah, your plan can sit here, it's non-disruptive, it's going to have so much positive effect or negative effect. Who's going to pay for that aspect of the project development costs? Is that something we should?
No, we do that. We cover that. So the way we have our project finance, we have we get a commitment of the total financing for the project, and we have a drawdown initially, which would cover either the acquisition of land or the feasibility or whatever steps. You need to understand that there's two big assets that we have as collateral, and those asset providers, one is a $10 billion asset, the other is an $8.7 billion asset. They did not put that in our hands as collateral without going and vetting the technology. So we know it works, we know it can be scaled. The risk is the location, the government approvals. We take on that risk. And I say that confidently because we're not, this requires a little bit of, no one wants to be first, right? So one of the islands is going to say, well, I want to wait for someone else to go. Mike, I see you, So we took that out of the equation. We're not asking for money. So normally everyone wants to learn the technology. They want to figure it all out. They want to see a demo. But because we come with substantial project financing, I'd love to talk to any of you about projects because we love what we do and we know we can build. And feasibility, we'll cover.
That sounds excellent. What's your thoughts on that, Dr. Rockefeller? What's your thoughts on what he just said there for West Africa? Not to take away the Caribbean conversation, but
No, we're still talking Caribbean. The West Africa just happens to be where I physically am currently located. In fact, I traveled from West Africa yesterday. I'm actually in Europe today. So my concerns are related to the invasive nature of water hyacinth. You know, we're concerned, we ought to be concerned about eutrophication. We have islands remarkably that are having water problems. It's a thing that you wouldn't think of as being possible, that an island that is surrounded by water with hills, lakes, and rivers, but yet still the water distribution challenge, finding potable water is a challenge for people in that country. So these solutions, naturally, they require contextualization so that we are sure that we're not bringing in, we're not just trying out new things in new places because of some, the urgency of the day.
May I make a statement?
Gentlemen, we will never introduce water hyacinth into a country where it doesn't exist.
Thank you.
Right.
We're never going to do that ever under any circumstance. But I will tell you also, from the standpoint of wastewater, water reclamation, water treatment, the CNAF is the answer to what it is that you're seeking, and it's non-invasive. And so from the standpoint, there's applications that my partner has done now. He's worked with Petrobras, which is the #1 oil company in Brazil. He's worked with Coca-Cola. He's working with the municipalities. The thing about it is, if you use this plant in the way that it's capable of being used, first of all, you eliminate the problems. You don't create another problem with it. And what Dennis said, absolutely not under any circumstance would we ever introduce water hyacinth to a country. Not us, not ever. Because you'll never get rid of it.
Michael, Dennis, point of clarification. I just want to know, I see a face that I haven't seen in the past few minutes. I just want to know whether or not we have the president or in finale or any one of his representatives who is trying to get on in any way, shape, or form. That not being the case, let's continue. I just wanted to make sure that there isn't anyone trying to get on.
Yes, I don't recognize any of his representatives. But I do wanted to shift the conversation a little bit back to Benjamin. Benjamin, the hydrogen technology also has a pollution mitigation aspect, if I understand right through my orientation, through a high pressure vortex molecular crushing technology, which enables it to be hooked up to wastewater treatment plants, sewage plants, and areas where we have industrial pollution, to basically crack pollution molecules back to its original state and mitigate pollution concerns, environmental concerns. Can you?
That's correct. Yeah, the kinetic reactor that we use to pre-treat the water for the hydrogen electrolyzer actually has been used in water purification for over a decade. So the way it modifies the orbital spin of the molecules, it actually decomposes certain matter and corrects the impurities. It's been demonstrated and tested. So one of the byproducts of our technology is the ability to put a water utility on the same side as our power generation. And if there's any need for support, we can do a lot with water purification. So I'm glad you brought that up. The other thing I did want to mention, which I don't think I said, is our technology is far less expensive than anything currently on the market. Right now, we have been able to demonstrate we are the lowest cost green hydrogen worldwide. I can say that with absolute confidence, that the companies shooting for targeted per kilowatt cost, we're already there, which means we can really add a lot of value. Again, working in partnership with the government, with private organizations or utilities, we can increase profit margins, but we're going to save the consumers a good 20 to 25%, if not more, off of the current utility costs. So there's a lot of benefits. So lower costs, 100% green, carbon credit creating potential, and the potential to also produce excess hydrogen for distribution and sale. So again, we have a very exciting technology. What I love about it, and I'll share this one more point, is it's not new. Okay, electrolyzers have been around for a long time. And I'm going to give an example. Back in the 90s with fiber optics, we were able to transfer data over white light. And then someone said, hey, maybe we can do the same amount of data over the colors in the spectrum. And everyone thought they were crazy. Well, guess what? We multiplied our ability to transport data by 16 times. It was something we didn't see or know before. So what we did with the electrolyzers, discovered a way to get it to release more efficiently. We didn't invent a new electrolyzer. We invented more the controls of how it's released. So we evolved and we discovered something unknown. And that's why we're so efficient and very excited about our opportunities.
All right, gentlemen, we are 5 minutes to the hour, and I must take the opportunity to do a final closeout comments. If everybody can take a minute or so to give your final comments. It was a wonderful panel. We transitioned from a fossil fuel vision or prospect to the possibility of this massive renewable energy collaboration. So also on the next panel, on the next panel is discussions on carbon credit and carbon credit financing on a large scale. So I invite Jerry Butler to stay on, and if Benjamin wants to stay on, and Greg, obviously, please stay on. So please, final comments, Dr. Rockefeller.
Yes, I'd like to thank you for your excellent moderation of the panel, Mr. Ramdahin. And I'd like to also thank the organizers for the invitation, and the seriousness of the expertise that's on this panel was very much appreciated. I feel really honored to have joined you. I can't say enough about the innovations that are being proposed as solutions for the Caribbean. I think that's the challenge that we've been having, that it's a response to my original plea to not stay with the conventional, but look for innovations. We need to include different voices around the table, include women around the table, get the youth involved now, so that the solutions of tomorrow could be found today using these new voices. And also, we could make a plea to target the resources of the private sector to fund these research and to enter into these markets and the public-private partnerships. But it also goes back the other way. Our countries in the Caribbean need to establish the political will and create the enabling environment that would allow for these new technologies to take root. Sometimes the innovations are right there in country, but they're not able to thrive, they're not able to come out because the political will is not there, the political infrastructure is not there, and the enabling environment that will allow for these technologies to come into play is just not available. So to find a way to collaborate to make sure that that happens, and we will make a difference. Thank you.
So thank you so much. And Dr. Akimboto.
Thank you. Also, I want to take the opportunity to thank everyone, organizer to the invitation, Eric, the introduction. I think we have touched several topics here that are actual and where it will be more than welcome or appropriate to have a lot of dialogue on this topic, and of course to make sure that we get them all into action and make sure we can help all people in the different region that they're in need and looking for all those alternatives for the continuity of the development of the region. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Jerry Butler, final comments?
Yeah, we need to thank everybody who really contributed to this panel. It's very interesting discussion. It informed, it educated, and to some extent, it entertained. This was the first renewable energy panel I ran where there was no mention of solar, wind, or hydro. In fact, it focused on hydrogen and it focused on biodiesel, which means the Caribbean is evolving and seeing things a different way. Solar has come down. I someone sent me a solar project to look at. They are producing at 3 cents per kilowatt hour, and they're offering the on sale for 8. I remember when I did solar projects 10 years ago, they were up to 22 cents for on selling and production costs at 16. So when I see technologies like hydrogen and biodiesel, I become very curious as to their price point for when I sell them to governments or to utilities. So my email is jerasa1@gmail.com, jerasia1@gmail.com. Still use my Washington, D.C. number, 202-716-7519. And I'm looking forward to the follow-up conversation after this with Benjamin and Michael, so that we can make these projects a reality. And definitely, I'm ready to come to Accra. Dr. Rockefeller, I'm ready to come to Accra. And Sergio, I always enjoy my time in Suriname. It's the only place in the world where you can go to a mosque, a synagogue, and a Roman Catholic cathedral, all less than 50 feet apart in the capital, and no one is fighting or shooting or killing each other.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much. Final words from Benjamin, and then Michael, and then we'll close the panel.
Yeah, it's been an honor to be a part of this, and I've learned a lot about the challenges. I've been focused right now in the United States with our rollout, but I'm just a fan of the Caribbean, and I just know there's just tremendous opportunity to make a difference in that beautiful, environment. So I just thank you for the opportunity. Clearly, I'm excited about what we have, but the opportunity to work with each one of you to potentially make a difference in the community while increasing jobs and sharing in revenue and making a difference in the climate really means a lot to me. So thank you very much.
Michael, quickly, are we
Yes, sir.
out of time here?
I want to thank you all for including me in this particular forum, and from the standpoint of the brilliance that Dennis, you have wrapped around inside this organization. It's impressive. And I wish to say that our company is devoted totally to feeding this planet, working with the environment, not against it, making it a better place when we leave than the way that we found it. And I think through many of the statements and the technology that's been offered, we have that opportunity to do it, and it can be shown that it'll impact the lives of so many millions and millions of people. And one thing alone, there are millions of people going blind every single year due to the lack of vitamin A in their diet, and water hyacinth is full of it. So from the standpoint of what we're able to do health-wise, what we're able to do from the standpoint of economic development, I know that we have technology and that my company has been working in this area for a long time. And I would very definitely like the opportunity of working with some of you gentlemen, should you choose. Thank you so much.
So well, and I want to thank all the panelists, my co-moderator, Eric Walcott, and all the other observers on this panel. Thank you very much for making it so interactive. And we look to follow up and get some great projects going. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Hey, Michael. Sorry, Dennis. I just want to add just 2 seconds of a comment. Once again, recognizing the convening role of the Caribbean Heritage Month for the Institute of Caribbean Studies. We've been long standing and long proven in our ability to bring some incredible minds together, and this panel was no different. You delivered wonderfully, Dennis, and nice sharing this co-moderator job with you, and to all enjoy the rest of your day. And again, try to stay on. There are many more panels to go.
Yeah, we are going to stay on. We're going to transition into the finance panel and talk also about carbon credit financing and green bonds.
Indeed.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
All right. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Thank you to Eric and to Dennis for the moderation, and then for all the panelists. Thank you so much for adding to the richness of the discussion that we've had. Not to be repetitive, but this really was some star power with some interesting ideas on here. Ideas that I would actually like to see come to fruition, because it really can help us in those conversations that we're having about climate and, you know, all of that. So those things are quite interesting. We're probably going to take like a 2-minute break.